Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. I am so delighted today. First of all, welcome to All In Magazine Live. And we're here today with Elaine Mullally. Now, I'm going to do a little interview or a little introduction for Elaine. And I love the way that she started her intro. I haven't said this to you yet, but I just love the fact that you started with this. Married to Aidan for 31 years. And I love that. I love the fact that you led with that because it shows a certain type of person. But that's the first thing that you've put in. It's beautiful. She is mother to Rachel, 22, and Becky, 21. And of course, in Ireland, it's very important to give a shout out to the people that we know. I don't know if you've ever watched The Late Late Show when they used to say back in the day, and hello to all that knows me. I loved it. Elaine has three dogs, chickens, and keeps bees, and she loves growing vegetables. She's a business owner and entrepreneur for over 30 years, established the first third level institution in her home county of Laois, Ireland. Now, we're definitely going to talk about that because that's very interesting. Founded a business group for play and leisure industry with insurance premiums being reduced over 100% for group members. Also, we'll need to have a conversation about that. And one second now. So actually, let's just talk about that to start with.
Sure.
Talk about the educational institution for a second, Elaine. How did that come about?
So back in about 2000, I was finished. I had studied for 7 years. I went back to college in my 20s, got married at 22, went back to college in my 20s, and I studied for 7 years. And all of the courses I had completed, I did a Bachelor of Arts in Management. I did the ACCA Certified Diploma in Accounting and Finance, and 3 or 4 other qualifications. But I had to travel. I'd commute for all of them. Excuse me. So I was working at the time for Laois County Enterprise Board, and I'd become in contact with a county councillor back then. His name was Jerry Lodge, and he was very passionate about bringing some kind of a third level facility to County of Laois because it didn't have one. So he and I and a group of members from the VEC, Laois VEC, all worked together, and we converted the old technical school in Portarlington. It's my hometown. That was converted into a third level college, and to this day it still offers 5 or 6 third level courses. We started off with ones like health and safety. UCD offered a UCD certificate in health and safety at work. That was a satellite course. I taught in that one myself. I delivered some of the presentations, and we also did the ACCA. There was an accounting and technician course also offered there, and they went on to develop. I stayed for about 2 years, and I set it up, managed it for 2 years. Then I had my second daughter, and I took a career break and basically set up my own business from there. I never went back to full-time work. Well, I work more than full-time, but you know what I mean, a structured
Yeah.
9 to 5 from there. So that's where there's a necessity. There's normally that's where necessity is the mother of invention, so to say. So it was just basically an opening there within the market. I felt it needed to be filled locally, and it was a very worthwhile community project that I was glad to have been a hand and part in. So.
It's incredible. It's amazing to be able to do something at that foundational stage, to get it set up and to get it started and to see the knock on effect it has for all of the people who got to use it and get to use it still. So well done.
Thank you.
Education is so good as well, isn't it? It's a very important piece. And I don't know if you ever saw the movie, and I love using this because it's just such a brilliant movie. It's called Robots. It's a kids' animation. And I remember the first time I saw it, and there was a guy in it, and his name is Big Weld, and he owns Big Weld Industries. And his saying is, see a need, fill a need. And I thought it was so perfect. And that's exactly what you just did. You saw a need and you filled it.
Yeah, I suppose I don't like problems. I'm very solution driven as a person. And you mentioned there the Play Centre group back in 20. So my business started in 2008. It's Clown Around Play Centre. It's a children's indoor soft play facility. We offer
Amazing.
birthday parties and general play. And in 2017, our insurance went from 3,500 to €7,000. And then 2018, it went from €7,000 to €14,500. So we, at that point in time, it was like, okay, we either sink or swim here. I knew we could afford to try. We borrowed to pay, to get us through 2018. But I knew if it doubled again the following year, we were in serious trouble. We wouldn't survive, basically. So what happened then was myself and 5 or 6 other play centre owners, I reached out to them, they reached back, we all started to meet up, and we formed PALI, which is Play Activity and Leisure Ireland. It's a play centre group, and we all came together. The amazing thing that happened when we all came together was we realised that our business sector wasn't a high risk, that the claims were not high. The insurance companies, what was happening is the insurance companies were paying out on claims even though we weren't liable for them. They were paying out on claims and we didn't even know in some cases that there were, well, not we, but some play centres didn't know that the insurance company were actually paying out for claims until the end of year when their premium would come in and it doubled, and they were told, oh, well, we paid out on an accident, it was 30,000 or whatever. So what happened then was there was 130 play centres across the country, and we all came together and we all formed this group, and we all went to a couple of insurance companies and said, okay, here we are, our package is worth X amount of money, our claims history is this, we've got very, very strict procedures in place, we get our play centres checked regularly, they're updated and maintained to a very high standard, we are not liable in 99.9% of the cases. So we managed to get our insurance half within a year, and they've come back down to a very reasonable price now. So again, when you see something, I don't want to run away from the problem. So it was a case of, well, what do you do here? And if you just bring people together, it normally fixes the problem itself, which is brilliant.
I feel like you've hit something really key on the head, because it wouldn't have happened if one person just went on their own. You got a group together who were like-minded and in the same field, the same area, and you could prove I suppose, your expertise, you could prove your professionalism. And once you hand that proof to somebody, there's nothing they can do except, see it and then make a decision on it. And the outcome is so positive. And I would say a lot of people who would watch this hopefully might take something from that, because we can often do things on our own as entrepreneurs or as business people. We can often need to do something on our own, and like you, want a solution, don't want the problem. And sometimes it can be very difficult to get that over the line when you're on your own. So coming together, finding people who are in that same space as you and doing it as a group is a much better idea.
Yeah, and you can feel very isolated as an entrepreneur and as a business owner, because there's been normally this perception that it's them against us, so the business owner is against the staff somewhere, but it's not like that. You're very I'm very connected with all members of my staff, and we have a great relationship. I actually refer to them as a team. We all work together, so we don't. But what happened here was we all came together, and knowledge is power. So once we had the information in our hands because an insurance broker or company can tell you whatever they want. Oh, you're very high risk. Like they told us our sector was the highest risk in the country, and it turns out that it's not. We had such a small amount of claims, and the claims themselves were relatively small. And when all of that when we could see, we had all the figures together, then we were able to we give much, much more bargaining power, because you're the one that controls the information, and you're the one who's able to tell the insurance company, insurance brokers, well, actually, we would like if you could include this on our premium, rather than the insurance company tell us we're doubling your insurance premium and your excess is increasing. And we were then in a much better bargaining position. So yeah, I think it's people coming together. This is what the Irish are great at. This is what we do extremely well. Is we're very community based, and we very much like to come together, form solutions, and then work together. There's such a satisfaction in my business still being open. 8 years on from this, what should have been a catastrophe, which should have closed down our whole sector, and yet we're all still there, it's brilliant. So
it's commendable, yeah, to see people working together like that. And actually, that's quite a good segue then into the next part. So let's talk about community, because I know that you're very community focused, not just in your business, but for the country and for your locality. So let's talk a little bit about who you are in terms of community focus.
Okay, so like locally, my town of Portarlington, I've been involved in, I don't call it the Port Arlington Tidy Towns, a group of us meet or have met on a Wednesday morning. We'd go out and tidy up a little bit. Now, the weather's been horrific lately and we haven't been as active. But over the past couple of years, we take on little projects and tidy them up and, put in flower beds and keep them sorted. And as I said, the Third Level Centre, which is in my own town as well. Nationally, I was recently involved. Well, if I go back, the referendums, I was active against the no referendum last year. I was so disillusioned by politics in Ireland that 2 years ago, myself and another person, we put together Independent Ireland. And obviously we had to attract, Independent Ireland is a political party. Obviously we had to attract TDs, which we did do initially. There was 3 TDs came on board. The party was set up because my personal involvement in the party was, I woke up one morning and I just looked out into my garden and I said to my husband, would we fit 2 log cabins in the back garden? And he kind of looked at me weirdly and he went, why do you want to put 2 log cabins in the back garden? And I said, well, where are our girls going to live? And that was the realization for me at that point. And that was 3 years ago. And I thought, we're in trouble here. Our generation, like we all, for decades, generations did better. So the children excelled and did better than their parents did quicker. That was the norm. Because we went to college and we studied and we worked. So we would have progressed a little bit further than, say, my parents would have. And then the next generation are supposed to pass us out. That's the norm. It's what we expect in society. But in here, I was looking, thinking, we're going to have to step it up for our children because they're not going to be able to get on the property ladder. And I have spoken to so many people, Ciara, particularly last year when I was canvassing for the general election. I spoke to so many people who are in their 30s and 40s who don't own a house. Like, I'm not just talking about our 21, 22-year-olds, people in their 30s. They're having much smaller families because they can't afford to buy, the rent is so expensive, childcare is so expensive. So I just felt at that point, we're not being listened to as a nation. Our government have this major disconnect with us as a people. They don't answer emails, they don't answer phone calls. They are literally unanswerable to us. So I established Independent Ireland with a view to changing all of that. The referendums came up last year. I was very, very, very strongly no. I struggled to get a no with the party because, again, there's different people. Somebody had said to me when I was establishing Independent Ireland, is the whole idea of a party not to, the whip system. And I was like, no, the whip system, this is completely different. You can't tell people how to vote and how to think and how to do. And that's correct, and I believe that. However, Independent Ireland is an independent party of independent politicians, so they're all entitled to think independently, which means they were all allowed to not want a no, and I was pushing really hard for a no. And then when during the European elections, like, the party itself is quite successful, I have to be honest. There's 23 or 24 county councillors in the party. There's 4 TDs and there's an MEP. But the MEP went to Europe and aligned with Renew, which is quite a left-leaning grouping within Europe. And that was kind of the deciding factor for me, that I really need to be able to speak, much more freely about my own political opinions. And I stepped down as chairperson, and I've done no harm to the party, and I wish them no harm. There's fantastic, good people within that party. So sorry, I'm kind of digressing from where you asked.
No, it's all good.
But it's all part of what motivates me and gets me going. So so the campaigning and no, I was very strongly against the referendum last year, which we saw was an overwhelming proportion of the population, over 70% in some cases. So we got that right. And then when the presidential came up, I was initially helping Maria Steen to get on the ballot paper. I think Maria would have made a fantastic president. But even if she hadn't got elected, I think she would have made a fantastic candidate and would have really, really put it up to the rest of them. I was looking forward to TV debates with Maria there. She would have just, it was amazing. But so I was helping Maria to get on the nomination. She didn't make it. In fact, no independent made it. I know they call Catherine Connolly independent, but she's not. So I was quite disillusioned that she didn't herself. And let's give them a shout out. Nick Delahanty, he was trying to get through the council route, and Garrett Sheridan. So they were the three main people who were trying to get through. Maria was trying to get through the council and the Oireachtas route. And we know what happened. The council completely blocked. Simon Harris said you are not to let an independent through the council route. And Micheál Martin may not have publicly said it, but he did instruct his councillors not to let a candidate through the council route. So therefore, it was blocked. It was blatant. It made the election extremely boring. So
completely.
I had no option but to decide to spoil my vote. And then a group of us came together, 8 in particular came together. They were mainly kind of big volume online accounts because it was such a short campaign that we weren't going to get a chance to do anything on the ground in relation to postering flyers, that kind of stuff. So we decided to try and push as hard as we could an online campaign for 3 weeks, which is what we did. And I believe it was quite successful.
This was the Spoil the Vote campaign. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, there was over 213,000 people. 13% of the electorate came out and voted against what the government were telling us that we should vote for, basically, is what happened there. And I think it was significant.
Can I ask you a question? Because I'd really love to clarify this, right? So often what you'll hear is that the reason you should vote is because so many people before you fought so that you could have your vote. Okay, let's just put that to the side for a second. True. And the reason that you shouldn't mess with the vote and you should vote properly is because you don't want to ruin it, right? Okay, fine. So where and why did the spoil your vote happen? Because I had read that it was done many, many, many years ago. And it hadn't been done in what, decades? It's been a long, long time since it's been done. And this was the first, and it's been so successful. And in my mind, the reason we were doing it was to show that there was an ineffectual system. It wasn't because we were going out to be lazy or to be rude or to be, degrading what had happened before and the people who had fought for our right to vote. It was to show that the system wasn't effectual. Would that be correct?
Yeah, well, for me, it was two things. Firstly, it was the ballot, the choice in the ballot. That was there was a 3-horse race. We know it went down to 2, but I couldn't vote for any of those people. That was one of my main modus operandi was, well, I can't choose between any of these. They're all the same to me, so why would I bother picking one of them? Yeah. But the most important thing was how undemocratic the government let the process be. So they've always had this power to block. They've just never used it. So in the previous presidential election, there was 6 candidates on the ballot paper. 3 of them got through the council route. It was always a job that the county councillors loved, particularly the independent ones, the opposition ones, because Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael would have always abstained. They would have not. They would never have blocked. They would have abstained when the councillors chose their candidate. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael stepped back and said, "Okay, we've got ours." I know they wouldn't have done this. There was never really a Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael candidate put through the Oireachtas like there was this time. But in fairness, they got a candidate through the Oireachtas, so they got their own little part. But then they went out and said, "Well, no, we're not letting anybody else on the ballot." And it was the undemocratic way that they did it, and it showed up the process for how undemocratic it is. And whether a constitutional challenge is required or change is required, I'm not sure what it's going to take to sort this out. But it was extremely democratic to use your vote, and it was extremely democratic, in my opinion, to spoil it, because those people who did fight and die for our right to vote, they would have turned in their graves had they saw what the government were after doing in this presidential. The president of Ireland should be elected by the people. This presidential election showed how controlling our government actually are, and we were not given a choice. Whether a Conservative candidate would have got elected or not we'll never know. But at least somebody should have been on that ballot paper. And a lot of people locally in my own town and surroundings told me they would never have voted for any of those three candidates that I named, Maria Steen, Nick Delahanty, or Gareth Sheridan. They would never vote for them, but they spoiled their vote because they felt the government's overstepping their mark was enough for them to say, well, what if there's a candidate there that I would like to see on the ballot? They would block them too. It just so happens that they would have voted Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, but they spoiled their vote intentionally so that they
Wow.
send this message back. Yeah.
That's something that I don't think I've heard at all, and it's a very interesting piece of information because it just goes to show that people really do want the choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And they felt they were robbed of it in this particular.
Mm.
I mean, it was the highest. It was the highest spoiled vote ever in Europe in an election, and it was the second highest recorded in the world.
Wow.
So we're sending a message. I mean, and Ciara, I don't know what that 13% represents, but it represents something because it was very, very 60 odd percent of people of the electorate didn't show up. So they didn't even bother coming out. So the government, they know, they've all stats on all of this, and they know that that figure represents a much bigger number in reality. Say if we had had another candidate on the ballot that people felt they could have voted for, well then how many more people would have showed up to vote? Yeah. And then how many people voted for either Catherine Connolly or Heather Humphreys because they felt they'd no other choice? We don't know that statistic. So there's a lot of players, but some mathematician or statistician has done the work in the background, and they know that 13% represents something significant. And we've kind of seen a couple of U-turns from government since. You know, they're sending shockwaves out about the immigration's not been handled correctly, and we need to look at it. So where did that come from?
Yeah, I have been watching Paul Trevo's different videos that he's put up, his ones that he does on Instagram. It's fantastic, always listening to him. And also I interviewed Eddie Hobbs for October's magazine. So it would be very interesting to get his insight into those stats this month to see where that's come from. Something else I had a look at a few months back as all of this was playing out was the percentage it takes of a population to turn the tide. So to go from, say, one extreme to just switch it around, not necessarily to go to the other extreme, but where people sort of take back their power. And it's only 3.5% of an entire population. So interesting to see, because obviously the whole population didn't vote. So how many voted and what number is that 13% of that? Because it does feel like something has shifted.
Yeah.
I just don't know what. And then I don't know what's next. So what, spoil the vote, fantastic. I think it was a fantastic campaign. I think it was well done. I think it was incredible to see what momentum it got in a short period of time. And now what do we do next? What happens next?
Well, I think it's important to let the dust settle. We don't know what's going to happen in relation to the government. Are they, will it do something? We'll have to wait and see. For the group, I think, we want to stay together and keep working. There's a couple of more campaigns that are on the horizon, and we're just looking into them. If we think it would be important to get a couple of more campaigns over the line so that people are feeling the momentum themselves. It's not just one trick pony or whatever, one hit wonder, as they say, that we're able to get a couple of more campaigns. And as a group, we worked extremely well and we were very cohesive. And don't forget, Ciara, this wasn't about our group. This Spoil the Vote was about a serious amount, 213,000 people. This is about them. This is about us. This is not about a group of people this was nobody's idea. No one came up with this. This was a reaction by the grassroots. It was an organic reaction to people feeling fed up for whatever reason, but they were fed up enough to go out on that miserable Friday and utilize their vote to protest against the government. I mean, there's all sorts of protests. There's marches. I've gone to some of them. I don't know what they achieve because the numbers are always fudged after. RTE will tell you that 100 people turned up, even if there was 100,000 there. And so I don't know what they really achieve. Normally they're on weekends when the government are not sitting. I believe the only way to do a proper protest is to bring it to the Dáil so that they're in there and they know that people are outside and they know they're unhappy and they know what they're unhappy about.
Yeah.
So this was a really good way for us to protest, and we will be working together on something. It's kind of heading into silly season now, Christmas and stuff. So and plus, in fairness, like all of us have businesses and we've busy lives outside of all of the campaign work that we're doing. So we have to find these windows and then find the campaigns. As I said, there's a couple on the horizon, and when one kind of pops up, it'll be a case of right, everybody jump on again and see how we manage this one and come together. So, but it's
Yeah.
exciting. I think we're living in extraordinary times, you know.
Yeah, I've said that more than once to groups of people I've spoken to. It's very interesting to be alive right now, for sure. Speaking of just what you said there about, the numbers and how media kind of tend to fudge things, where do you think that's going? Do you think that we are moving in a direction where we're coming away from mainstream media as much as possible? And do you think that all of these incredible influencers accounts, and they're not proclaiming themselves as influencers, they just have influence, a great amount of influence online on social media. Where do you think all of that is moving?
Yeah, I think people get carried away sometimes with how many followers and likes and clicks and all of that they get. And just before I move into that, I ran in the general election last
Mm.
year, this time last year. And, you might have, I can't remember how many Twitter followers I had at the time, but I had a decent number. And I'm going to guess it was about 25,000. I remember at the time somebody said, "Oh, you've 25,000 followers on Twitter. You fly it in the general election." And I was thinking, I worked out, I said, if I get 50 votes out of those 25,000, I will be doing well. I knocked on every door in County Laois that I could knock on. I spent 2 full months with a team of about 30 people, and I got 65,000 flyers. I think there's a box out in my garage of about 2,000 flyers left. So yeah, so we walked the length and breadth of Laois, knocking on doors in every town and village across the county. I turned up to football matches. I stood outside giving out flyers. I went to one church outside the church one night. I didn't feel I was very welcome, so we didn't do that again. I stood at train stations at 6 o'clock in the morning, busy train stations giving out flyers. I went to everything I was invited to speak at. I called to schools. I went to men's sheds, women's sheds, everything in between. Like I did a serious amount of work on the ground, and I got 2,500 first preference votes. You would think so. So all of these online accounts, which by the way I'm delighted with, as a first-time candidate, it was enormous. But the work that I put into getting those votes, and it was all on the ground. I mean, social media has its place, but you cannot replace working locally, talking locally, meeting people locally, door to door canvassing. That work is invaluable. And I know if in the next general election, if I decide to run, I have to do all that work all over again. You can't take anything for granted.
Yeah.
Going back to online, I think mainstream media have a certain viewership. They're normally older, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say 70, 80 years of age. By saying that, I have family and friends who watch RTE who don't believe any of the news anymore. They take it all with a grain of salt, and a lot of them use WhatsApp messaging for their source of information now, which surprises me. Facebook, I think, is quite local. Twitter is more international. But I think Facebook is hitting that. I think some of that older generation are now moving towards Facebook for their source of information. And we know, like, there's an awful lot of rubbish up there as well. There's an awful lot of people putting out stuff that should be taken with a grain of salt. But we need to be, I think, and it's one of the things I have been meticulous about. Anything I put out, I research it. I get the backup documentation, and unfortunately, unless it comes from some form of mainstream media, as in the Irish Independent, the Irish Times, RTE, Gript Media, I use them quite a lot for my sourcing because all of their information is fact checked and it is correct. I've yet to see something they've put out that has to be pulled down. But unless I can back up my own videos or whatever I'm putting out there, unless I can back that up with something like that, I won't put it out, because there is a lot of stuff circulating that you just couldn't
Yeah.
stand for. And people, I think, over time have found trusted accounts, but we need to be careful. Like you said, just because you have a big following doesn't necessarily mean that the information you're putting out is credible. It doesn't necessarily mean that it can be, everything you're saying can be trusted. It's important to find the right people, the people who are putting it out consistently, that it is trustworthy. That would be my view on it. There's all sorts of, and we know there's crazy lefts and there's crazy rights. I mean, that's just the way there is. But like 80% of people, or probably even more, 90% of people are somewhere in the middle, and we use common sense, and we only want the best for this country and the people in it. So yeah, so I think people are moving a little bit away from the mainstream because they don't trust, and you don't trust it anymore the way they used to. I used to trust it, and I don't anymore. So I'm assuming there's quite a few more people who'll be like me.
Oh, 100%. I've had so many conversations with people who said, I don't watch the news anymore at all. I don't watch anything. I just can't do it. I just won't do it. And they're very distrustful of what's going on. And rightly so. And like you said, online, AI is another thing that has come along, and the distortion of so many things, videos, everything. It's, again, fascinating time to
Yeah.
actually be alive, to watch everything that's going on, and taking everything with a pinch of salt. What's that phrase? Believe half of what you see and none of what you hear.
I haven't heard that, but it's good.
I feel like we should apply that to everything these days.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's have a chat here as well, because I want to talk about hate speech. So, on your bio, active campaigner against hate speech legislation and recent constitutional referendum. So, let's talk about hate speech.
Mhm.
And I suppose it's a good segue from social media, because it has stemmed an awful lot from that. It has stemmed from, especially when you're looking at the UK, I don't think we've gotten this bad just yet. Whether we're on the way there or not, I'm not sure. But you see people being arrested for a tweet and arrested for a Facebook post or a comment. Or how do we decide what hate speech is? Who has the right to decide that?
Well, this is it, because what might offend you won't offend me, and what might offend me. And plus, Kira, I believe that every single person has a right to be offended, including me. So I have a right to be offended by somebody saying something. Like we have laws here for crime. So they're effective to a degree, but it's illegal to break the law. And I mean, we know what all the crimes are: theft and murder and
Mm.
burglary, all that kind. So hate speech, to me, in the government sense, and how they're trying, when they can't define the word hate, is a very, very dangerous, murky territory to be heading into. And what I believe, I don't think, even if hate speech legislation was brought in, firstly, we don't have to do it. That's the first thing. All legislation that's coming in through Ireland, and they're saying it's EU legislation, all legislation in the areas of freedom, security, and justice, under Protocol 21, Ireland has an automatic opt-out. So in other words, we get to decide what we adapt and what we don't adapt. So our government automatically are opted out. So in other words, they have a certain time frame to opt us in, which means they have to actually actively go into the Dáil and the Senate and get this brought through, which doesn't seem to be a problem for them. They seem to be able to do it quite easily because we don't have any opposition, well, proper opposition. So in relation to hate speech, the scary part about this is that even though it might never actually come into force, as in, like, if the hate speech legislation was brought in, the guards would have the authority to come into my house. If somebody reports me for a Twitter post or anything, for down the town, I happen to look at somebody sideways and they decide, oh my God, she looked at me funny because, or she said blah, 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 and I go into the guards and report me. The guards will have the authority to come into my home, to take all of my electronic equipment, phones, work phones, laptops, iPads, my children's technology, iPads, phones, whatever they want there. They will have the authority to take them off my property, and we have to give over passwords, or you get fined or sent to jail or whatever they do with you there. And so you have to comply. And I think the threat of that alone will stop people. People will self-censor. And that's what they want, I believe.
Yeah.
They want people to be so afraid of anybody coming in and doing this to you or your children that you will just automatically not put anything out anymore. And don't say anything about the government, because that might be considered, Micheál Martin might say Elaine Mullally put out hate speech against me this morning and the guards come to my door and blah, blah, blah. We know what happens next. So that's the fear. The fear won't be actually that you will go to jail for putting out something that you shouldn't put out. Because again, society has always taught us what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. We grew up in school playgrounds, and if you said something and it was hurtful or nasty, your buddies said, "You don't be saying that." That's we learn it. That's what we learn in society. We don't need the government dictating to us what words we can't use and what words we can use. That's very dangerous territory. And I recently, back in March or April, seemingly the European Commission had instructed Ireland to implement the hate speech legislation by the 7th of July, or else they would be brought and up to the European Commission. They would be brought up to some European court. And then about 3 weeks ago, I see Jim O'Callaghan, the Minister for Justice, has written back to the European Commission and told them that we are not implementing any more hate speech legislation. So we have the authority to do what we want. Yeah, I know, he's such a rebel. We have the authority to do whatever we want for our country. We don't have to be dictated to by Europe. And again, this is another misconception out there. People, oh, we have to get away from Europe. No, we don't. We just need to use our boundaries correctly
Yeah.
and tell Europe, no thanks, we're okay on this one. We'll sit this one out. We're happy with what we have. Like when you see countries like Hungary and Poland fighting aggressively against the EU migration pact to get themselves out, and then you see our lads went and gave it away. It's like,
Yeah.
but we have our own autonomy in relation to all of this legislation, and I think people are now realizing that more and more, that we don't have any restrictions around us in relation to, or any obligations. That's the word I'm looking for. We don't have legal obligations or moral obligations to do any of this stuff. Our government are just using that terminology so people go, oh God, Europe's at it again. It's not. It's Ireland's at it again.
Mhm.
You know.
And there's so much division in that. It sounds like Ireland needs to say, "You're not the boss of me," to,
Yeah,
whoever's coming along and thinking that they are.
exactly.
But like you said, it comes from the government. It's a government issue. It's easy to keep people scared when you come out as the government and you say, "Well, this is what's come from Europe, and this is what Europe are saying, and this is what we have to do now, and this is coming in," and people feel that,
Yeah.
but they really don't need to, is what you're saying,
Yeah.
because the government have a choice. They can say, "No, we're not dealing with that."
Yeah. And the government, again, I've often heard people saying, oh, Europe has us to stride. No, it doesn't have us astride. Europe was, we entered into this agreement with Europe back in 1973, where, we were going to have open trade between all European countries and free travel, and we'd be able to work and all. It was just, the arrangement was fantastic. It's this overreach that the Irish government have allowed Europe. And then, of course, there's dependencies on finance. So our agricultural sector is heavily dependent upon payments for different schemes and stuff now, which is sometimes I think it's unfortunate. I know they're needed, but it's unfortunate. You're paid to farm your land, you're paid to not farm your land. You're paid to grow hedges, you're paid to cut the hedges down. Oh, but the following year they want the hedges back in again, but it's too late because you've cut the hedges down to get a grant last year. So it's these choppy, changey rules as well that just don't make any sense to a lot of people. Oh, we're going to cut our national herd by 200,000 cows because our cows fart and they're adding so much to the they're destroying the planet. And it's kind of like, but we're going to import beef from
Yeah.
Brazil. Okay, now explain to me how feeding cows in Brazil and bringing them importing them to Ireland is not more harmful to the environment than the best agricultural land in the country being used to feed our own cattle. And to, I mean, it's
But
the
that's a
nonsense.
simple answer. There's a simple answer for that because Brazilian cows don't fart, obviously. So that's
Yeah,
why we're getting them. Do you know
right.
what I
Okay.
mean?
Yeah. Well, that makes
That's
sense.
how that's how funny it is, though, isn't it?
Non-farty cows way up the farty ones from Ireland. So what can you do? But it
As,
just, I mean, we're laughing at it, but it's a joke.
yeah, and it's actually happening, you know. But I just typed in there, we teach people how we want to be treated, and that feels like what's happening. You know, the Irish government capitulating to Europe, the big bad boss, and then people feeling that that's how they have to respond to the government. So there's a knockdown effect.
Yeah.
And everybody is in that position, you know, how is it that you actually would like to be treated? And then if we got to teach people that, if we got to say, well, this is my boundary and this is what I don't like being crossed, um, and maybe work up the chain.
Absolutely. I mean, go back, look at something like housing. You know, I would like to be able to build on my own land. There's a good start for farmers in
Mm.
particular who are being locked out, their sons and daughters are not been given permission to build on their own land. And like I've talked about this to so many people. The restrictions around, go back to, again, I like giving my own example, people understand better. I built this house, myself and my husband built this house 30 years ago. 30 years ago, we only had X amount of money. I mean, I was working as a secretary at the time. My husband was working for a manufacturing company, very mediocre wages. You know, I would say if there was such thing as minimum pay back then, it was minimum pay. We were able to get a mortgage, buy a site, and build a house. 30 years ago, two ordinary incomes. That's what we were able to do. Over the years, so we've a septic tank because we're not near a mains. We upgraded our system. Over the years, we put the extra insulation, got the walls pumped. We've got the attic extra insulated. We now have solar panels, 16 solar panels. We generate quite a bit of our own electricity, particularly during the kind of, I won't say drier months, but when there's a bit more sun daylight hours. We've done all of that over the years because financially we were getting stronger as a couple and we were getting, our jobs were getting better pay, etc. So we've been able to make our house say a B rating. Now, in this country, you cannot build a house unless it's A rated. And that's the starting prices are around 300,000. That's a third of €1 million to buy or build a house because of these ratings that are being put in, forced upon people who are starting out in life like we were when we were 22 years of age, and we hadn't got a pot to piss in, literally, but we moved into our house when it was a shell and we didn't care. We were just madly in love with this house and we were going to do it up over the years, which we have done.
Mm.
People are not being given the opportunity anymore to take something, to make it their own, to expand, to make it whatever they can over a period of time. They're being forced and told, you have to build this type of a house or you have to buy this type of a house because this is what the regulations are and this is what we're being forced to do. I don't know anything about that air to water system, but a few people I've spoken to have said during winter months and when the weather freezes, it's extremely expensive to run it. I don't know, I haven't got it, but we've our own little heating system here and it does us and it's perfectly fine. And we burn a few logs in the winter and we're not doing any major harm to the environment. But it's all of this over-regulation that has the country destroyed. And I had a conversation recently, just to bring the correlation. I had a conversation recently. I was coming home from Brussels on a flight, and a pilot sat beside me. He was in his 30s. And I said, he was from Cork, and I said, he said he was engaged, he was getting married, and I said, what's the housing situation like in Cork? I said, can you afford to buy a house, or can you find a house? Because in Laois it's very difficult. And he said, yeah, it's not too hard, it's not too hard. He said, myself and his fiance were in the process of buying a house in Cork. And as I said, he was a qualified pilot for over 5 years. And she has a senior job with Cork County Council. and they were looking at bringing in a lodger so they
Wow.
could afford to pay their mortgage. Now, to me, that was this is only in the last few months that I've had this conversation with somebody. And this is what people are having to resort to. We don't know about this. We're not hearing about this on RTE, how difficult some people are actually. But he looked like he was in his 30s. His fiance had a very good job, much better jobs than me and my husband had when we were starting out. And the only way they can afford to buy a house is if they bring in a lodger. And he told me that himself. And they were actively looking for somebody that was going to be able to come in and rent a room off them while they were paying their mortgage. That's where we
That's
are.
right. Yeah, there's so much to do with housing. I often listen to Donald Byrne on Instagram, and he does BRB housing, BRB homes. And I don't know if you've ever seen what he does. So the big red barn he had, and he goes out and he builds the house, steel frame houses, fantastic. They'd be up in, I don't know, maybe very short amount of time, six days, 3 weeks, something like that, very short amount of time, really solid houses. But he's talking a lot about this housing situation as well, and how they've implemented a new plan, but it doesn't seem like the plan is feasible, and how atrocious it is that you can't get planning permission. You buy a site of land thinking that you're doing the right thing because houses are too expensive. You're going to build a house. No, you can't build a house. Why can't I build a house? Because you can't get planning permission. But I can't afford to buy a house. So what do you want me to do? It's almost like there's blinkers on, and they're not realizing I don't know, the ginormity of the issue right in front of them for so many people in country. And then people wonder why people leave the country.
Oh, absolutely. They can't afford to live here. And certainly not the next generation. Our eldest daughter has moved to London for work and to live independently, and she can afford to live in London and work.
Crazy.
Yeah, I know. And she couldn't find a job here, but if she had have been lucky enough to find one as in suitable in the field she wanted to work in, she would have had to live at home with us. And it's no problem for, but again, she's 22 years of age and she sees herself as being an independent young woman and she wants her own independence, which I completely
Yeah.
understand. But to have to move away for it is a pure indication. I had a niece who's in her 30s who had a very, very successful business in Portarlington for 5 or 6 years, employed quite a few staff, generating a bit of economy in the locality. And she had to move. She's gone to Australia to live because she just could not afford rent or couldn't get on the property ladder. As a single woman, you cannot, or I presume as a single man, even unless you're earning astronomical money, but you're penalised here for owning your own business anyway because you don't have, you're not on a payroll system the way you would be, and they don't see an entrepreneur as somebody who's viable from a mortgage perspective. There's so much wrong in relation to just one issue, which is housing. You just mentioned it there. You buy a piece of land, you go to the council for planning permission. First question, are you from the area?
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, I'm not. I thought I'd move to the next county. Ah, Jesus, no, you can't be doing that. You can't be jumping counties on us. It's like, come on. So
It's crazy.
it's,
Honestly.
I know. What color now is your hair? Oh, it's not red. No, I come like somebody has. I don't know who it is, but I saw some really good videos on this. Where people go to the council for planning permission, and it's just the questions they're asked. And again, that's people will blame Europe for that because if you look, our county councillors have very little authority anymore. In relatively speaking, all the guidelines are coming from supposedly Europe, but it's our government allowing that to happen. And now the government look like their county councils, and everybody's answerable to Europe because they're supposedly the ones making all the decisions. Whereas our county councils should be able to make decisions locally about, particularly in relation to planning,
Oh,
and
100%.
particularly in relation to own bills. We should be encouraging more and more people to build their own house. What's happening then is they're not dependent on the state for housing, for building affordable housing, for any kind of state intervention. They should be able to build their own. Again, if an ordinary working class couple like myself and my husband were able to do it, 30, and we weren't on our own, by the way, Kira. Lots of people my age own their own houses or bought or built their own houses. Lots of people. It was the norm, and it's not the norm anymore.
No, and something I've heard that I find very interesting is more and more people are looking at buying land together. So, as in, say, for example, there's you and your husband, and you have a couple of friends, or there's, say, your brother and sister, or whoever's in your family, buying land together and building houses together on the land so that there's a big number of people coming together. Say there might be 6, 10, 12 people buying land together. And I've seen it work in England. I haven't heard about anybody doing it in Ireland so far. And I think it's a really nice idea. It's a bit commune, can probably come across as a bit of a commune. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? I think it's only bad if it goes down the route of a cult. That might be a problem. But I've seen a couple of people in the UK do it and buy 100 acres of land and multiple families move onto that land. It's hard when that's something that might be the thing that has to happen in order for houses to be able to be built.
I look. It sounds like a great idea to me, particularly if you get on with your family.
Yeah.
But like it is, it makes sense. Buy land, put the infrastructure in, because you're
Yeah.
sharing all of the resources to get infrastructure. And don't forget, like when we did build 30 years ago, we had to contribute, and you still do to this day. You contribute to the infrastructure, so
Mm.
that's part of the planning, and that's fine. People don't mind contributing or participating. I love the fact that I'm helping the next generation if I'm paying a fee towards electricity, roads, all of that kind of stuff. It's that we feel that nothing's happening at the moment because nothing is happening at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, Again, developers, I believe it's getting more difficult to get mortgages, to get loans for them. That's large and small developers. We need all of them. And as a result, then the cost of materials has gone up because of all of these stupid carbon taxes that are being added on to concrete blocks and all sorts. Like, it's rubbish. We don't know what's happening to to the carbon taxes that are being collected. And again, as a business owner, I look down through my electricity bill that comes in now, and I'm looking down through it going, there's that many taxes, and it's hard to make out how much my electricity costs anymore. It's actually the cheapest part of my bill is the cost per unit that I'm paying for the electricity company, because everything else is a carbon tax and a service charge and then there's a charge and the service charge and a tax on the. So I get confused. Just how much do I owe you? And it's a fortune. Um, but I love that idea of the
Mm.
communal, of buying a large piece of land and all developing it together. I think it's brilliant. Um, will the government allow it? Sounds
Isn't
too
that the question?
sounds
Mm.
too common sense, logical for me, Kira.
Logic and common sense, huh? Two things that aren't that common. And it's such a pity because it does come back to it. You can't buy land unless you're from the area, unless you're in a particular catchment area. You can't put a fire in your own house if you build a new house. You can't put a stove in a house if you build a new house. There seems to be so much, as you said earlier on, overreach.
Mm.
And there's a lot of policing that seems to be going on for things that aren't necessary, that just aren't necessary. People have been doing this for a long time. And to not be able to do this, to not be able to build your own house, to have to look at, well, a bit like you said at the very beginning, this is about looking at solutions.
Yeah,
Does it have to be? Should it have to be? Maybe not, but it is.
yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, our government don't seem to be solution based at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
It feels like um, and I mean, people have theories about that as well, but I think the worst thing that ever happened for Ireland was for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to join together. They kind of held each other to account up to that point, kind of, but once they joined, that was it. Um, and I think that's probably one of the most. You can't rule where an opposing party joins, two opposing parties join each other and rule side by side, and then they sucked in the independents there recently. They sucked in the Green Party in the last general election, and no small party ever survives a government. We've seen that in history. So they're gone. I know there's Roderick still left, but he's the only sitting TD as far as I know. And the independents coming in, there's what's happened in the last 12 months since they all came in. very, very little. Housing's got worse. Healthcare's, there's 750,000 people currently waiting on health treatment in this country. We've a similar 750,000 adult children living with parents who want to be out on their own, with probably significant numbers of emigration, which we don't know about because, you know, not everybody tells you that their child is left, but like a lot of my nieces and nephews have gone to Australia, and as I said, my own daughter has had to leave. And we're losing a serious amount of, you know, highly skilled, qualified, intelligent, hardworking people because, you know, they can't afford to live here. And that's a pure indication that society is not, that the government are not working for the people, and society is not working as a whole. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's serious questions there that need to be answered.
So you, with your solution focused head on, could you see, or do you have any ideas of solutions that could change certain things? So change what would be needed to be done now to change housing? Do you have an idea? Would you love to be able to implement something if you were part of the government?
Well, we mentioned you know, bringing power back to the councils. I think
Hmm.
the autonomy needs to go back to where the decisions are actually being made. Um, and you know, at no point in time have I heard or seen where government have sat down with builders, with the people that are doing this work, and discussed with them, what do we need to do to help you? Because you can be guaranteed it's bureaucracy and red tape that's slowing the whole system down. And you know, what do we need to do to, again, I'll go back to when I ran last year in the general election. I went over to the ploughing championships, and I went to any of the tents that had any farming groups. And the first thing I did was I looked for who's the chairperson of this group, and I'd go over and I'd say to them, what do you think needs to be done to help farmers in Laois? And they said, well, there's a grant in, and I said, no, not money related. So take money off the table here. What can be done to help farmers in Laois to farm better? What, said if all the money was removed in the morning, and you know, he actually engaged with me. We had about a 20-minute conversation where he said, nobody has ever asked me that question before. And I said, but I said, from a practical point of view, like, do we need to be, what do we need to grow more of? What do we need to grow better so we're not importing, we're not so dependent on imports? How can the government actually help farmers, not throw money at them? How can we help them? And like the conversation opened up, and it was just, I could tell he was nearly relieved he was able to voice his concerns, his opinions about what's wrong in particular sectors. And I did the same with the Irish grain growers. And you know, I went out, walked across a field for 2 hours with the chairperson, the Laois chairperson of that, and we had a great chat. I had a great morning. I loved it anyway. But again, it's going back to grassroots. It's going back to basics, and the simpler things have always worked. Keep it simple, stupid. That's what we've learned in society, in life. It's keep it simple, stupid. So, like, housing is such a vast issue. It's hard to say what one thing, but it needs an overhaul. Like, we need to sit down a proper conversation about what's wrong and then how do we fix it. We need to know exactly what's wrong first, where the blocks are coming within the system. And then we need to find out, is it bureaucracy? Is there 5 people, 5 layers in an organization that need to go in order for us to fix this problem? Yeah, we do. Okay, get rid of them. Now let's go and look at the next hurdle. Okay, how do we fix that? It can be fixed, Ciara.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
have the power to fix this. It's just the will has to be there. The will has to be there.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that, going back to basics. And it takes the hierarchy away from everything when you're looking at things like from that point of view. You know, how can we do things at the base level? What do we need to do first? Simple things like growing, simple things like you've done in your house and in your home over the last 30 years, you know, electricity, solar panels, you know, whatever you can do to bring it back to what you can do to look after yourself and your family and the community. And often I think people look at things from a big panned out view, And you can get very stuck because you can't see solutions when you're looking at everything all at once. But when you do come back to that grassroots place, that basics, it's much easier to start saying, right, well, I can do a bit here and I can do a bit here. And that small bit will all add up if everybody did it as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. This idea of working together again.
Mm.
If one person starts something here and then other people watch and see, well, that's working. Again, if I use my own example here, I have a polytunnel out the back and I have a few raised beds, and I'm growing for the last 6 or 7 years and cannot grow broccoli, cannot grow carrots. I mean, the caterpillars have an absolute field day with my broccoli. They eat much more of it than we ever get. And so what I've done is I've looked at what I can grow, and I can grow potatoes quite well in my soil. I've got my whole harvest, my whole onion harvest is stored out in my garage that will last me the whole winter. Onions, garlic, tomatoes grow really well, obviously in Ireland, but I have a polytunnel and I grow a lot of what I grow well and freeze it, chopped up in little bags. I'll use them for stews, soups, all of that kind of thing during the winter. They're vacuum packed. And then you find other people who grow other things well. And then you're able to start trading. I'll give you a bag of onions for some broccoli or whatever you're not able to grow because, and that's again going back to basics and keeping things simple and working out. I'm not wasting any more energy on stuff that I can't grow well. What's the point? I'm only wasting my time, only wasting energy, seed, etc. So, but it's great fun, going back to doing all of that, going back to what probably my grandparents did. But certainly our ancestors grew off the soil and lived off the soil, even fruit and everything we can get. We've our own honey here. My husband mainly looks after these, but we've our own honey every year. We sell a small bit of it, and I've my own eggs. And just look at you feel good.
Yeah.
You feel good. You feel good when you're living, when you're using the land some way, for your own produce. There's a real feel good. And I know not everybody is as fortunate as I am that we were able to find this land 30 years ago and buy it and build on it. But like you can grow in containers, you can grow in little bags outside you. You don't have to have an awful lot of land to grow a few bits. It's not, but it's just a feel good factor. As Gandhi would say, tend to the soil and you tend to the soul, and that's where I love being out there. I love growing a few bits and pulling weeds, and well, I give out about the weeds, let's be honest, but
I love that, tend to the soul. Um, I think it really is. It's about coming back to the community and the village. That phrase, it takes a village. When you're doing stuff like that, like you said, you grow one thing or you grow 10 things, somebody else grows 10 things, you're swapping them. It comes back to that community. And we've gone so far away from that often, over the last, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years.
yeah,
And it would be so lovely to come back to that. And even if it was a case of multiple people buying land together, multiple people having allotments and growing together, all of those kind of things, they seem simple. Some people can't do it, some people don't like doing it, but you might be good at something else. Finding that group of people that you can come together with to find a solution, like you did with the insurance in your business. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
It feels like a much better way of doing life than going it alone and trying and slogging your heart out and it not working.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I think so. I think the more people even start to want that again, we've
Mm.
become extremely distracted with technology. Um, it scares me, to be honest, with where AI could end up going. We won't know what's real and what's not anymore. But so part of a challenge for me is to limit my time on technology. And some days I'm great, and other days I just kind of indulge. But I am trying, and I think it's a big. I think screen time is huge. It's a discipline that um, that I'm trying to reinstill in myself because we didn't grow up with technology, so I know I can live without it. Despite what
Same.
I'll just check my Twitter one more time.
Yeah, I think I can.
It's a little addiction, and I've read quite a few books on this because obviously when the girls were small, technology had started to grow, and I was concerned about where it was going to go and how I was going to manage with my two girls. So I read quite a few books. Screen Kids was actually one of the, or Glow Kids, sorry, was one of the books that I got the most amount of information from. And I remember reading that book and I was nearly horrified at the thoughts of it. And now everywhere we go, everybody's on their phone in waiting rooms and bus stops and train stations and absolute walking down the street, banging into you. So when I read that, it gave me a really, because of course this book was written about American children, so they were much more advanced technology wise than my girls would have been. But what it did was it instilled in me that you have to have boundaries. You don't just give a child car keys and say, there you go and drive the car. You have to learn how. So the rules that we would have instilled in the house here around mobile phone usage and technology has I partially rubbed off, I'd like to think, with my daughters. And but those rules still need to be enforced for me, because now that they're not around as much, I have to be. And when you get, when you're on social media, you go on it. I go on it for a little bit of a fix. You kind of go, oh, there has to be something on it. And then you go on and you're after wasting an hour, and you're saying, oh
Yeah.
God. And then you're upset with yourself because you've spent so much time on it.
Mm.
So I think that's distracting people a lot from real life, from going out and meeting people and just walking down to town and tell you to everyone. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It was, I think, that community spirit. I'd like to think it's still there. I'm still quite active in my own community. Myself and my husband still go out a couple of times a month at least. We meet up with people in our local, and I think that's, if we can keep that alive in society, I think if we can keep some, and it doesn't have to be obviously pubs. It can be whatever, your local community centre for dancing lessons or yoga or mindfulness or whatever, basketball, whatever you're into. But I think to keep people active in communities is a vital key to keeping communities alive. And I think that we need to do that. And technology has its part, but we need to be mindful of it as well, and control it or discipline a little bit better. I'm talking to myself right now.
It's okay. You're talking to me too, so I'm taking it on board. I've been having this conversation with myself for months.
So have I, and I keep promising myself every week now. Next week now, allow yourself.
Honestly.
I've screen time turned off on my phone because I think I would be so annoyed with myself if I
Yeah.
see how much time I'm actually spending. And I get loads done with my day. I don't know how,
Yeah.
but I do.
I looked at it one day and I went, oh,
Today, and I got all this.
Jesus.
I know, it's incredible. But think how much more we could do, Kira.
I know, like if you saw the amount of time, you'd go, yeah, no, that's not good. And it's not constant. But when you think about how many times you go on the phone throughout the day, just clicking in, it might only be for 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 2 minutes, but that all adds up throughout the day.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what bothers me is I might go on to, because I'm going to Dublin next week, and I might go on to look up the times of the trains to Dublin. I might go in to look up the time, say, right, what time are they going up on Monday? But it might take me 20 minutes to do it because there's about 5 notifications. You check them first, and then you put down the phone because you forget why you picked it up in the first place. And then you go back over an hour and go, geez, I've heard enough of the times of the trains for Dublin. And you pick the phone up again, and there's 4 or 5 more notifications. It's like a little trap, isn't it? It's like, how can we stuck her in here? Because, she likes to flicking around there to see. And I was never on TikTok until recently, and my daughter said, don't go near TikTok. Stay away from TikTok, ma'am. I'm telling you now.
Oh, no.
Well, I should have listened to my daughters. And they're all little cat and dog videos. It's like...
Yeah. Anything to do with a dog or a cat or a baby laughing.
Yeah.
What are we like?
I don't know. It's strange.
I watched something. I don't know if you saw any of the Eating with the Enemy on Virgin Media. So I knew Stephen was going to be on it, and I had interviewed him a couple of months ago for the magazine. And I clicked in, but it wasn't on the original Virgin Media. But I saw one of the episodes of the very first series. And this mum, she would have been in her 40s, and she met up with what her partner that she was meeting for this dinner with the enemy was a 22-year-old guy who's in tech. And they sat at the table, and this just came to me when you were talking about your kids and screen time. They sat at the table, and she said, "You know, my kids don't have phones." And he was a lovely lad. And he said, and so when are you going to give them phones? And she said, maybe when they're 15 or 16. And he looked like gobsmacked. And he said, but don't they miss out? And she said, well, no, because they go round to each other's houses and they play in each other's houses and they go outside and they play. And he looked like he had no idea what she was talking
Really?
about. And he said to her, but wouldn't you prefer they had the best of both worlds? And she looked at him and she said, no, because that's not a good world. They have the best of the real world. They're completely connected in real life. So why would they want to disconnect at all when you have that and it's right there and it's on tap? And I think that that's the problem is we've been sold social media as a connector. It's great for connections. You can connect with people all over the world. But the more often you're connecting with people all over the world, the less often you're connecting with the people who are right beside you in your
Yeah.
town, in your community, in your house.
Social media has made us more antisocial.
Oh,
I'm afraid
yeah.
to say. I really believe that it has, and it's a battle. Like this is a battle we need to win,
Mm,
um, and I think more and more people are realizing it. I do.
yeah.
Um, like having the play center here in town, it's obviously it's complete interaction. It's
Yeah.
full on, So we see the opposite side of the kids sitting at home with glued to screens. We see the opposite to that. We see
Mm.
kids coming and yay and running and jumping and playing and having fun, and it's complete social interaction. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
It's the way forward. So tell me, Elaine, what would you like to leave people with today? It has been fantastic talking to you. And where can they find you, first of all? Is Facebook a good place to go and find you?
Well, I'm on all socials, unfortunately. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I'm ashamed.
So you definitely find her on TikTok.
I'm sure, Kira. I have a website.
Yep. Let me know what it is and I'll
Yeah,
pop it in here in the chat.
it's www.elainemullally.ie. So my full name, elainemullally.ie. And I have a fantastic guy, Aidan Joyce is his name, and he looks after all of my media and my website. And I'm just understand if he is watching, thank you, Aidan. But I don't really know what I'd like to leave people with, except maybe, to keep hope and to keep talking, to keep connecting with one another, and to keep true to yourself. I think that's probably, if we can keep doing that across all platforms. And I'm conscious that a lot of stuff that I put out is, given out about government all the time, but it's to counteract what the media tried to put out, and that's to create this image that the government are doing a great job, and that that actually we didn't touch on it, but that the whole mass immigration that we're experiencing, that it's some way these people's fault, when it's not. This is our government's not managing immigration that's caused a lot of the problems in the country at the moment. So I I hope people can get something out of it. Whatever they get out of this, will be of value, I hope. And I, it took me a long time. I'm 53 years of age. It took me a long time to realize that my voice is a tool that I can use, and if it can bring something of value to somebody else's life, then I'm going to keep doing that, as best as I can, and as authentic and genuine as I can, because that's all I have to offer. So, yeah, and just
I love that.
thanks for listening.
I think it's so important. And I found Elaine on Facebook and I just love the videos that you do. I love the way that you vocalize things. You're very well spoken and articulate. And I think for anybody who's interested, who has maybe not had a very deep interest in politics before now, I think you're a very good person to actually go and watch those videos, because you speak directly to the point, you say what you need to say, and I definitely would say that you do give hope in a broad sense of the word, in terms of what's possible and going forward what can happen. So if anybody is looking for Elaine, start out maybe on Facebook and on her website, and then you can find her on all the other channels.
Brilliant, Kira. Thanks for that.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for giving me the time.
Anytime. Thank you. Thanks a million.
You're a star. Thanks.